Welcome back to BT Vancouver on Monday, June 1st, and it's a big one for kids across the province because many students are returning to the classroom in some form. It's going to look a lot different than it did prior to spring break. But let's break this down right now. We'll bring in Lisa Yuzda from Victoria. You're the legislative reporter for News 1130, joining us a lot these days because there's so much to talk about, Lisa, and it's schools front and center today.
Yeah, there's a lot of kids going back to school, a lot of kids also staying at home. Having a hard time getting from the province the exact number of kids that are returning back. Some places it's as few as 20% of the students who were there before. Some places as many as 80%. I heard the average across the province, they're expecting about 50%. Of course, not everybody going to be in school at the same time. With grade schools, they will do half the students, half the time, and then Fridays are a day to relax. So I think there's a lot of stress for parents, probably more than kids, going back and wondering how safe their kids are. Dr. Bonnie Henry spoke about this weekend. I know BCTF's Terry Mooring talked about it with you this morning, that they've made these decisions consciously and cautiously, that they are doing these with the children in mind, and they would not be doing it if it was not safe. Having said that, we know that in Quebec, there were a few dozen cases in the schools there, and Dr. Henry was asked about that this weekend as well. And she said, different situation a little bit in the way that they've approached it there versus here, but also that the cases were not in children, they were in adults, and adults bringing it in and spreading it amongst adults was what she explained to us. But that it is possible, and it is, something that they are prepared for, that there could be a case in some way, shape, or form in one of the schools here in BC.
So many different variables when it comes to families and their decisions to send kids back or to keep them home. I was speaking with some friends of ours via Zoom on the weekend and getting a different perspective based on what community they're living in. Some saying as much as a quarter of the school going back, and some just saying a handful. Like, for example, my daughter is just one of 2 kindergarten students going to her school today. So what are the kind of factors you think that are making these kind of decisions for families?
Well, I think it depends if you're an essential worker, if you have to go back to work. I've heard from families who have 3 children, who have 2 parents trying to work full-time at home, and that's impossible. But they're in a family situation in which they can accept the risk of returning their children to school. They're still keeping their families very small. I'm in a family where we have someone who has cancer, and so we're not sending our children back because the risk would be too great for us. So I think there's a lot of variables that families are weighing as they do this. There's other families who I think, and there can't be any judgment here, who maybe have just had enough and find it too stressful to have their kids at home. And that is absolutely fair. I think, again, that it has to be said that from all that we've heard from the teachers, from the health authorities, from the health minister, from the health officer, this decision is not one that was made lightly. It was one that was made with safety paramount, top of mind. And so if people keep their distance, if things go as planned, everyone should be absolutely safe. I'm more concerned, part of my thing would be that our child likes to move around, and for kids who are in grade school, they're going to be stuck in their seat all day. They're not going to be able to play with their toys like they did before. There's no carpet time, there's no centers, there's no library to go. And for our child, that's pretty much the joys of school. So we would like to deal with the rest of it at home and not have to tape her to a seat, because they probably have to get her to stay in one place for a whole day. Yeah,
you're preaching to the choir on that one. My daughter loves to run around. They need that peer interaction, but socially it's going to look a lot different. I really enjoy in Pitt Meadows what Edith McDermott Elementary did when the superintendent last week there put out these 3, and I think there's 4 now, YouTube videos called The Return, really highlighting all the different aspects that will be different once students go back at various grades. I think it's a lot easier for the older kids to adapt to remote learning, but when it comes to the elementary kids, it can be a big shock to them adjusting to this new norm.
I'm of 2 minds with that. We have a 4-year-old, and, as soon as we go for walks sometimes, if anyone gets close, he jumps back and says, social distance. Yeah. So he's very good at understanding it. So I don't know. I think it really depends on the child, how they're going to do. And that school really set a standard. Our elementary school, after that one came out, sent one to all the families in our schools, showing what our specific school is going to look like for the kids who are going back. And I think that is probably very helpful to make the road in a little easier for the children who are going back, and for the parents who won't be able to enter the schools to see what their children are experiencing during the day.
And then once we look ahead to September and things like that, is this sort of like a test case for how things are going to go?
Yes, they say that, but I think, we know that from here to July, let alone here to September, it could be a whole different world. But I think they've said they want schools to return in September, but they're not going to look like they did before. What that's going to look like, we don't know, and whether we'll have to pause again if there's a second wave. There's just more unknowns than knowns at this point.
All right. We appreciate your insight this morning, Lisa.
Pleasure talking to you.
Okay, thanks very much. That's Lisa Yuzda, News 1130's legislative reporter, and we've got much more.